Without further ado, I bring you a local that I met at the Psychedelic Society many years ago when I began volunteering, a local Lakota Coyote Shaman born in Portland, Hawkeye Clark. Hawkeye has walked the red path for nearly 20 years, walking in two worlds with both the native spirituality and a heavy science-based path has allowed Hawkeye to fuse in the use of psychedelics and the science behind psychedelics with intentional spiritual lifestyle, incorporating macro and microdosing psychedelics for personal growth. As you heard some other people talk about, he has a video up called Intentional Microdosing, which was a talk he gave at a Portland conference here last summer. And we are going to hear from him specifically tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Hawkeye. We're going to go into speaker view mode, and we will begin recording.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I am one of those few people that have been on this psychedelic road for quite a while. I've met quite a few people through the years. I officially joined the Portland Psychedelic Society about the time Paul Austin was in town, and that's about the time I got introduced into psychedelics at a microdose level. I'd been interested in microdosing, and that was the beginning. I started also speaking publicly at that point. Now, my psychedelic use has been ongoing for 30 years, covering a vast spectrum of psychedelic use, and DMT just happens to be one of my favorite. I have been microdosing, and I started out with mostly LSD and fungus for psilocybin for dealing with my own personal mental health issues, which are bipolar. I have clinical depression. I am physically disabled and have been almost 40 years. So I have been off of Western medicines for these mental health issues and using exclusively microdosing for several years now. Now, I've always been kind of on the fringes. I am a coyote shaman of the Lakota spiritual path, and we're kind of outliers anyway. We don't conform very well to rule sets, and we have a much looser realm in certain things. I still have to follow certain spiritual belief systems and taboos that are native, but incorporating the psychedelics into it really helped me bloom into a psychedelic shaman overall. Now, last summer I did the intentional microdosing beyond the molecule, and I kind of called it a guided path to successful microdosing, and it went really well. And one of the things that really got attention was the fact that I am mini-dosing DMT. And almost immediately you get the, well, how is that done? And I assure you, in 2 to 3 years, this is going to be much more talked about. Now, microdosing psychedelics has always been in this group. It's always been a sub-perceptible level of psychedelics that you enter your system. And you know you're undergoing physiological changes. It has certain physiological systems. It's hitting your serotonin system. It's also got some mental effects that you can feel. So people don't often want to associate DMT with microdosing because they can't handle the disconnect between sub-perceptible and DMT, which is extremely powerful, and you should not take it for granted. Now, I like to call it mini dosing, and of the many facets of my presentation last summer, I focused on intention as one of the guiding principles of this lifestyle. And the intention behind my psychedelic use has changed, and my microdosing has changed as I have evolved in this personal growth. Now, initially LSD and fungus were my focus, and that was getting me to a stable place. And now that I've moved past that, I'm in a much more mental headspace. I've mini and microdosed ayahuasca. I have mini and microdosed mescaline. I have been mini and microdosing DMT for a while, and I have a couple different specific methodologies for doing that. Now, I do have a bit of a show and tell for people. This is a DMT discussion, and even with the caveat, I'm going to be showing you some things in person so you know what to look for. Now, Jayson pointed out when we had Dr. Strassman on, that what I have for micro and mini doses is a little bit different, and I will explain the differences. Now, what most people are familiar with is NN-DMT, and it's fairly common. The extract is fairly straightforward chemistry. And one of the reasons you should be listening to me and then going and doing your own research to verify that I'm telling you the truth, as any conscious human should be doing, is critical analysis, is that the different DMTs have a much different feel. And I'm going to give you my kind of viewpoint on DMT from the intentional viewpoint of mind enhancement and more of that nootropic mindset, where I'm not microdosing, mini dosing for breakthrough. Charles, I cannot emphasize enough that your come down mindset, that statement is right on the money. There is a limerence period post DMT. That mindset is a heightened mental state. You're operating at a much more higher frequency as a human being and a conscious individual. That's why I've been micro and mini dosing DMT. Now, so people ask how I do it. It's this thing. It's a vape pen that's been made for me. And I'll explain how it's a little bit different in a little bit. But here, a little bit of show and tell. This is the NN-DMT that most people are probably familiar with. Good quality is often a very white powder. It depends if it's been plant defatted, delipid, and taken to a higher purity. There's also if they crystallize it or just leave it as N-N-DMT freebase. Another thing that is less common, and this is the NN white, is Mimosa Salis root bark derived. That's the most common, and that's what most people associate with DMT. Now, this is what I have that's also in here in a slightly different form. This is Acacia root derived DMT. Now, this is bespoke. I had about 1 kilo of Acacia root bark, and I had a local genius chemist make this. It has not been defatted. There's still plant lipids in there. It has not been taken to 99 purity. This is low 90s purity, but I really feel that the lipids and other things in DMT are what give you the characteristics of DMT. And Acacia is a little bit more spicy, wild, jungly if it's a jungle root. If it's desert, it's more spicy, much slower onset. It lingers a bit more. You're not going to feel it right away. Like, NN-DMT is much more like with the mimosa, is much more of a sledgehammer to the forehead. With the Acacia, it's much slower onset, lingers a bit more. And with this, leaving the plant lipids, there's 5-MeO in there, fragmentary 5-MeO. There's para-alkaloids. There's fragmentary alkaloids from the actual DMT. So when you take it to pure, you're just getting the DMT effect, but you're not getting all of the other chemical components in it. So when you take NN-DMT, which is technically in organic chemistry, it's called a freebase. It is not water soluble, it's not oil soluble. If you take a certain amount of DMT freebase and add it to fumaric acid, you get DMT fumarate, which in a liquid form you could snuffleate. But if you take DMT fumarate with vegetable glycerin, it will dissolve. Then you can put it in a pen like this. Now, this is a variable voltage output. This is a refillable cartridge on a vape pen battery. I run variable voltage. I run it at the lowest voltage, and vaping is just like this. And you moderate and regulate DMT usage in a micro mini dose by how many puffs. Now, I have this very low setting, but each one will get your mind much more activated. And you're not going for breakthrough. You first feel the physiological effects of your body calming down, a little bit elevated heart rate, blood pressure increases a little bit. The more you puff on it, the more you feel your mind activate, and you get more into that mental mindset of the DMT realm. Now, intentionally microdosing, I like to do it as a performance enhancing mental enhancement for things like this, because I get much more eloquent. And one of the things I deal with is social anxiety and performance anxiety sometimes. But one of the things is I've learned through microdosing psychedelics is I'm able to perform in a much more mental high state with the mini dosing DMT right before. And I don't get nervous because I'm much more in that I'm not dealing with people one-on-one, but a side effect of the DMT puts me in a much more connected mind space with everyone. So in that realm, not only am I elevating my own mental attitudes, but I'm also increasing my connectedness. I find that DMT, especially 5-MeO DMT, which is a much more powerful substance DMT than N-N-DMT, is much more of an empathogen, whereas MDMA, MDA is kind of in that empathogen range where you feel more connected to everyone in the environment. Fungus has a very heavy nature empathogen content. Microdosing and mini dosing DMT are like that. While I'm not doing microdosing, I have perceptible effects. I'm not going for breakthrough. I'm going for elevated mental status without the breakthrough and the pretty lights. Now, shamanically, I would just tell anybody who is new to DMT, even some of the veterans out there, that the bright lights and pretty colors from breakthrough DMT really are the waiting room. And the work, personal growth work you're going to get on DMT is when you get past the waiting room, the pretty lights and the sounds, and realize that you have to delve deeper and go deeper. So even in a microdose, mini dose, you can feel the edges. If you're doing shadow work in your own personal growth, you can feel the edges of whatever shadow work is there. It's not any kind of overwhelming, like threatening to take over your experience. But if you're cataloging things that you're working on, micro and mini dosing makes my brain in particular act much more like a computer and can keep much more things active at the same time. So when I'm microdosing and mini dosing DMT, I'm often approaching the intention with the mindset of personal growth, performance, things like this, anything where you need sort of more higher mental platform and access to higher order function. Now, as far as show and tell, one of the things I get asked frequently is my favorite method for doing macro doses of DMT, breakthrough doses intentionally. And I've done the various methods with the little pipe hookahs or whatever they're called. They look like crack pipes. I hate them. But I've tried like the foil ball loaded DMT machine. I've done powdered over raspberry leaf and cannabis. I've done various methods. Now, if I'm going for breakthrough dose, I'm not going to use a DMT pen. This one was made specifically for me so I could microdose. So it originally had about 1.5 grams of DMT in that entire cartridge, but I've used it quite a bit. If I'm going for breakthrough dose, that's a much different animal. And I have found with experience that if you take like a banger style nail from cannabis use, okay, now this one's filthy. This is specifically a banger I use for DMT. Guilty. Look at that, filthy. And then I have a cat. So what I like to do is take a measured amount of N-N-DMT, which can be anywhere from 50 milligrams all the way up to 75, 85, 90, depending on tolerance. Once I start with a breakthrough dose, I have it weighed out, 3 measuring places, 3 decimal places. I put it in here cold, all right? I put the cap on, and then I gently heat this with a torch, like doing dabs, okay? This is called a cold start. So you take your measured amount of DMT, put it in there, cap it, hit it with a torch until it vapes off, and you will literally see the bowl fill with smoke. And you kind of time it for, it's almost like, you know, popcorn in the microwave. You got to time it just right. But like you just hit it to where the smoke starts to stop being produced. You let it cool for a second or two, and you've got your whole hit in one ready to go. That's the most efficient way I have found. Personally, with intentional breakthrough, I like the McKenna's 3-hit methodology. It's much like in other lifestyles, there are 3 breaths for, like, I'm very active in the hook suspension community. As a Lakota, it's an altered state of mind being produced by the ordeal path. And a lot of times they'll use a 3-breath method for piercing. So like, I very much like Terence McKenna's intentional 3-hit method, and that's often very efficient, especially if you've got a vape pen with full dose NN-DMT. But if you want the least amount of harshness on your lungs and the least amount of coughing, it's very harsh. DMT is like that. And I like the cold start. It's nearly flawless in its execution. It's just a little fine tuning as you get used to the vaping. But one hit, and I like to take a bong, just a regular cannabis bong. I like to take all the water out of it. I have found over the years that there is some interaction with water and DMT, and the more water you have in your cannabis bong for doing DMT hits, the more it will take the DMT out of the smoke, and it catalyzes so quickly that, you know, I just take the water out. It's much easier. Now, I have also found, in addition to mind enhancement, mental acuity enhancement, I've also found it in that empathogen realm, that like taking DMT to like private warehouse dance parties that go all night, where like it's not exactly a party favor, but you can sort of like, if anybody who has had several breakthroughs know how much your body kind of relaxes on DMT. And I have found in that late night warehouse kind of party vibe, like it's very helpful for taking the edge off of feeling physical pain. And again, the side effect of the empathogen is I do feel more connected to people there, and my enjoyment of the event is much better. Now, I'm trying to pass on a metaphor here that I've used before with people. And some people have brought up some good questions, like what's the difference between a 5-MeO experience and what's the difference between an NN-DMT macro experience and a mini experience. And if you take a macrodose DMT experience, and if you want a mini dose, so imagine a DMT experience being plotted on a bell curve, just a very simple bell curve, and the peak is just removed. And I want to really re-emphasize the point that was brought up earlier, is that like the mental mindset going up is valuable, but the coming down aspect is just as or more valuable, because it tends to linger slower. You peak much quicker, and you have much more time at the tail end of an experience than you do at the beginning of an experience. You're really actually going to do most of your processing post-peak. And why I like micro mini dosing is I can just sort of bump up to the point where it would start to be cut off, like I'm cutting out the peak. So I do this sort of roller coaster where I'm keeping my mindset in a point that's elevated, but it's not in the peak area. So really what I'm doing is taking that peak, rounding it off, and keeping myself at a plateau, and keeping that plateau as long as possible. And that can be done with 2 or 3 puffs every couple of minutes. Now this, you know, breakthrough is usually up, down, 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops, right? But we're not going for breakthrough, we're going for sustainability. So the other than intramuscular or IV injection of DMT, the only way to sustain a DMT trip is to keep doing DMT. But like people try to repeat dose, macro dose DMT levels, and it's not quite as efficient because each one's going to present a little differently, and you're already high. So like there's a problem of weighing. This is much more stable for me, and it keeps me on that plateau performance peak at a much more stable, easily done. Now, this is DMT fumarate. It's made from Acacia. It's a little bit different. Now, I've seen at least 5 different designs on the black market for DMT. This one is vegetable glycerin and DMT fumarate. You can make DMT with NN-DMT freebase, but they have to use petroleum glycerin, and there's a supplicant, I believe it's called. They add it to vaping, often in nicotine vaping, to keep things in a liquid form. And NN-DMT doesn't like to stay in solution very well. I have seen one style vape pen that actually just has big chunks of NN-DMT that was fairly good quality. That was really interesting. It had like a little air control slider at the bottom. This one is just a publicly available, you can get these online anywhere. It's just a nicotine style refillable cart with a wick that does not require any fabric or cotton or anything like that. And this one, I've been asked how to measure like what the milligram per dose is, and that's kind of really important. But like, I haven't really found a way to measure it. Like my chemist and I talking about it, we discussed it's probably right around 1 milligram to 5 milligrams per hit, depending on the voltage and how much you're hitting it. So I'm thinking it's really low, but it like extends your mental processes to the point where you feel like you're performing at a much better level. See what else? Oh yes, I was going to have one more show and tell, but that did not present itself. But I can move it to Q&A. I get asked a lot of questions about differentiating visually the different DMT styles, which is partially why I wanted the show and tell. You can see it anywhere from really chunky yellow to really powdery white. And I wonder, I think I can share photos in the chat. But after the presentation, I can try to bring a photo. Crystalline DMT is a much different animal. And I had some about a year ago. When you get to the point where your chemist is crystallizing and then recrystallizing and then recrystallizing and you get the purity way up there. And with people now getting into DMT extracts, we now have a lot of amateur chemists who are now getting to that, oh, wow, now that I've done this and I've researched crystallization methods and crystal lithography, I can do this. So we're seeing a lot more pure DMT, and I'm talking like above 96, 97%, and like into the 98%. Starts getting really granular, and then you get like really, really pure DMT, NN-DMT is really snowflake crystalline, and then it gets really chunky at that 99, 100% purity. I do want to put a warning out there for new DMT experience people. When you get these stronger DMTs out there, too much DMT can have negative side effects. And this is one of the things that isn't talked about much at a macro level. And it's the serotogenic overload of too much DMT all at once. Now, usually when you get these high purities, I've seen people that will take 75 milligrams of a fairly well done 92, 93% NN-DMT and have a brilliant, great breakthrough experience. But I've also seen people take 50 milligrams of some really pure DMT and end up passed out and puking on the floor. So it can happen. You can have some very negative serotogenic effects, and like learning to visually identify kind of DMT is important. But like it's a hard lesson to learn because there's very few examples. I would check Arrowwood and certain other examples for a visual library of those DMTs. I don't have a whole lot more other than I wanted to open this up for Q&A as much as possible. I did have a list of questions, but I pretty much got to them. If people have presented questions, I'm more than willing to take some questions for a while.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. I do see this in the future for artistic enhancement, performance enhancement, mental acuity enhancement. 2 to 3 years, this will be much more popular, and it's going to develop when people learn the chemistry behind getting it into a viable product for people. Right now, they're available on Darknet fairly easily, and if you're into that, if you're not into that, I don't know what to tell you. I want to thank Portland Psychedelic Society for letting me do this. I know I'm kind of at the fringes, experimenting with DMT and powerful psychedelics on the edges like this, but the knowledge used to be out there, so here I am doing it. Oh, here's a good question. What do you feel like physically at the moment? Again, DMT does have physiological effects. There's a relaxation as you kind of relax whole body. The serotogenica hits, you get a heart fluttery, which is often your blood pressure fluctuating. You can feel your body temperature elevate a little bit. Really, I get those feelings first, and when I get those feelings, I know that it's starting to work. And a couple more puffs, and I know I'm going to get my mental, which is usually the last thing that will is get that going. So it's more physiological at first, and then you get a couple more puffs in, and you get to a much more performance level. Anyone else? Challenges.
What about insufflating DMT to sustain the effects? You talked about not being able to continuously macrodose it.
To make DMT insufflated, you need DMT fumarate, which I've done. You can put it in distilled water and then snufflate it like a spray. Much like ketamine, you can put it in a nasal spray and do it that way. I find DMT burns quite a bit snufflated. Like, without treating nasally with saline and really like bracing yourself, it's kind of a gnarly and snufflated drug. It's kind of harsh. And without, I do know one person who opted out of saline prep for their sinus cavities and ended up burning their sinuses a little bit, which brought DMT fumarate. You just grind it to a powder. That is a viable way. If you've got enough DMT on hand that you can insnufflate and you're comfortable with insnufflating DMT, that's totally a viable way. There are several underground high purity DMT intramuscular IV experiments going on that are really, really promising. And physiologically, it looks like the body responds very well to these long duration visits. And I do like to call them visits, as it's always felt like a different realm for me, especially when you start moving into these. And so the body seems to sustain that realm very well. It seems that physiologically people tend to even out really easily in the first couple of minutes. And then it's just a matter of agreed upon duration at that point. And then it's just an IV drip of a meter dose.
Excellent. How about this one? The synthesization of DMT, one of the most naturally occurring chemicals. What do we know about the synthesizing it and like the cost and manufacturing, etc.? Do we know anything about that?
Synthesis of DMT is tricky, only in that the end product is a difficult one to get. You're really looking at this. I think this is where Dr. Strassman came in. You're looking at tryptophan shaped, serotonin shaped molecules. And I do believe that we will get to DMT synthesis eventually. Extract is just far more efficient at this point. Right now, there's things like 4-ACO DMT, which is a synthetic psilocybin. So the chemistry's there. It's a serotonin-shaped molecule, so I think it'll be done. Right now, it's far easier to extract.
Tristan, do you want to hop on and ask that question?
Yeah, sure. I recall, like, in your presentation, you talked about using the mini doses to help with social anxiety in situations and stuff like that. And I was curious, like, when you would take it, like before a situation, or would you take it, like, what is your method into choosing how often you want to take it a day, or yeah, pretty much something like that.
Methodology.
Yeah.
I don't use it every day. While you can, I find it far more effective if I limit my use to when I need the performance anxiety, when I need the up. So for an instant like now, for this meeting, I started using the DMT vape pen right before I logged in. And then I've been using it off and on as Jayson and I were discussing what exactly was going to be happening. And so like, it's just I kind of use it a little bit beforehand to kind of elevate. I continue to use it during to kind of keep me there. And then as things start to slow down and I don't need those mental processes quite as much, I'll start to use it less.
Hawkeye, what's the longest duration that you have done the periodically enhancing so that you keep yourself at that plateau? What's the longest length of time you've kept yourself at that plateau?
Okay, so when I got this was full. Okay. One of the first times I used it, it was, how do I share this without sharing it? It was a underground warehouse rave type environment. I was not exactly in party mode. I was much more in kind of co-host and just having a good time because I wasn't throwing the party. It was much more relaxed kind of there. I was able to use the DMT for about 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
Off and on. Yeah. I had a little corner in the back. At one point, about 2 in the morning, I was going deeper. One of my favorite friends was DJing, and I really like his style of music. So I was kind of in the back of the room, kind of going deeper, and I started taking bigger hits and going deeper into DMT land. And even in approaching macrodose levels, it's still a very navigatable space mentally. I've never had any kind of fear or anxiety over DMT. So for me, being able to sustain kind of an elevated DMT mindset over a 6 to 8 hour period, I felt kind of superhero-ish after a while, to be honest. So I on a macrodose level, I have spoken to a few people that have been under an IV DMT experiences for 90 minutes. And that's pretty long for a full-on post-breakthrough inside DMT realm. I would say I was at like a very strong mini dose for the first 4 hours. After about 4 hours, I hit it really hard for a bit. And then I tapered off, and around 6 to 8 hours, it was only a few times every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it really tapered off.
So you mentioned something about artistic enhancement. Is this something that you have experienced yourself?
Yeah, I have done some art. I can show you this. If you've been in my presence and you've done DMT, you've done a guided journey, you get one of my stickers. This glows in the dark. It's got the DMT molecule on it. And I did actually make this after a DMT experience. It's an old-fashioned bathysphere guiding element. Kind of neat. I do a lot of spray art, graffiti style art, sticker art. I do kind of have an artistic bent. Right now I have a really serious political art thing that is all private, cathartic stuff for me, but DMT can enhance the more creative aspects, especially if I want to get into the more surreal, psychedelic type art, you know, the sacred geometry, the mandalas. I keep promising myself that I would like to start painting some of the DMT entities that I've encountered, but like, you know, I don't know, it just hasn't manifested yet, I guess. So like, it can enhance creative processes artistically. I do know several artists who have their art has changed completely after ayahuasca and DMT. So I totally valid for artistic expression.
And do you know any musicians that have used it, what their experience has been?
The most successful thing was a impromptu jam session where I was passing the DMT pen around to seasoned vets and got them all on mini dosing DMT, and then had a multi-instrument jam session. That was pretty epic. It's much more free form and jazz sounding because it's all At an empathogen level, it's almost like you're handshaking and handing off notes to one another. So it was, again, a totally viable way of using it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. We got maybe one more question, and then, you know, Hawkeye is going to be part of the discussion, so these questions can come up in the group as well. But if we do want to ask one more of these, who had one? Okay, Jerry Wiggins. Let's just start there, and then we'll open it up and after this, and that is, how do you test for purity?
That is a really good question. The easy answer that I can give you is there is a methodology for testing purity, and it does have to deal with crystallography and a microscope. Okay, there's tests for, I know that there's tests for purity, but a lot of DMT is going to require experience and a visual kind of experience. I have seen so much DMT over the years that I'm really waiting for somebody to assemble a visual grasp using pictures. A lot of the DMT I'm seeing in Portland area that is amateur done is very chunky, it's very yellow, it's very predominant smell. It's usually in the high 80s, 86, 87%. Again, there are tests for purities, but it's spectrography and crystallography. You can use a mass spectrograph to test. Once you get to a certain purity level, you get like snowflake crystalline, and that's really in that 97, 96, and it starts smelling faintly of roses, and you lose a lot of that solvent smell. And as soon as you get into that really above 95, into the 97, 98 range, it really comes down to how many times that person has crystallized, grown a crystal, and then put it in solution for purity, filter, recrystallize, and it's all about how many times you recrystallize to get it closer and closer. So the purer it is, it'll form crystal structure, and this crystal lattice is known. So there's pictures online of really high purity. As far as you and I, like getting out and finding a kit or something to tell us purity, there's really not a way to do that. Yeah, I can't think of any offhand, but like really you're looking at chemist level kind of stuff. So it's really kind of a visual eyeballing of stuff. And then of course, when you take it, we'll tell you again, really pure stuff has a much different feel than the stuff that has not been defatted per se. And like the Acacia feels different than mimosa, but the purity levels also have a different feel. I would like a solution to this. A purity test would be awesome.
Righteous. All right. Well, thank you so much, Hawkeye. That was insanely informative, and you know, one goes up in the top tier of all times of informative meetings here. So with that said, we're going to keep going with more questions, and feel free to jump in and continue to share, and people can ask questions to Hawkeye. But before we do that, we have one more part of this meeting I want to make sure to get to, and that is Nathan Cooper has some exciting news related to Alex Gray, who is a very well-known and maybe the most well-known DMT visual artist. So we're going to hear from Nathan quick, and then we will jump into open discussions.
Thank you, and yeah, welcome everyone. I'll keep this brief because I probably mentioned this in a few different ways in a couple different meetings. But Peggy asked, and I'll just share a screen. Oh, no. If someone can enable screen sharing real quick, this would actually be something useful to show, if possible.
Go for it.
Oh, okay. But Peggy had asked about, you know, how did it change, say, Hawkeye's art? This is an example of how it changed my own. The piece on the left is, I don't know, one that I made, and the one on the right was made well, the piece on the left was made before, the one on the right was made after. The one on the right's about 8 times the size, and the level of detail is just extraordinarily more. And this, I would reject any assumption otherwise that it was anything but that DMT experience. It was absolutely definitively that. I can't emphasize that any more than to say it was 100% that. I mean, I have like the ability to create this myself. I've been like professional artist in some capacities for a while in the games industry and whatnot, but the quality of the content, the level of detail, I don't know where it comes from except there. And, but beyond that, I think more interesting, and I'll stop sharing this right now. If someone's interested in seeing any of my artwork, feel free to message me and I can link you to it. But the upside of that for me is that it just ignited like just some inspiration to create a bunch of art and related specifically to that experience. And the direct result of that was in February, I applied for a private internship with Alex Gray and was accepted. And that I don't believe would have happened had not it been for this experience. My art, my interest in, well, I had no interest in, say, describing these states. They were foreign to me, but this just ignited, like, just, I don't know, the amount of content that took place in less than 10 minutes time is infinite relative to any inspiration I've had in my life since. And it's, I don't know, it's extraordinary, and it's more so that I can't explain it. But I'll just say briefly for my own self, from that experience, I had a friend who had a kind of nicotine style pen with a large kind of battery mod. He had it measured out. He said 2 hits to breakthrough. But I'll say for anyone that hasn't had the experience, and this is anecdotal, it's just mine, and this is NN-DMT, by the way, that I'm referring to. But the onset, and I should also caveat, I've flown supersonic before. So the onset of that within less than 5 seconds was greater than flying at Mach speed. No bullshit. For me, I mean, I've been like a roller coaster enthusiast my whole life. That's what I ended up, the reason I wanted to be a pilot when I was in the Air Force. I wasn't a pilot, but I did get to fly a couple times. And I was always like looking for that. Well, if that type of thrill is what you're after, imagine jumping off the moon, bungee jump. That probably pales in comparison to what the first 2 seconds of that experience felt like. But nonetheless, and I would say, if anyone's a fan of the TV show Fringe, I don't know, a while back, it was a popular sci-fi show. One of the concepts of it was kind of a multiverse, and the physics of it was pretty neat. But nonetheless, they would time travel or travel between other realities in the show. And kind of the onset of that DMT experience for me was like a bomb, or what actually looked more like a black hole grew out of the space that was the room that the experience took place in. And it was just like a tunnel of that, you know, it just went on, and the character, the effects are unlike anything I've seen, and I've seen plenty, and compared even to, say, an ego just dissolving dose, say, LSD. It has a character entirely its own, and in some aspects it was like hyper digital, some it was look cartoony. I'd describe it to some people like if you play video games and you're familiar with like Borderlands or anything that's cel shaded, it almost looked like the environment I was in was like, it was animated, but the resolution was just extraordinarily high. Like 100K wouldn't even be sufficient to describe the quality of like the texture and the detail in that space. It was unreal. And there were like glyphs, and every surface I remember was just kind of animated. But the one thing that I remember my friend told me before I had this, he's like, understand, he's like, this is intense. He's like, so, he's like, you may want to close your eyes. And he's like, at a point you won't have a choice but to. He's like, but for a while you can. He's like, you might want to. Anyway, it wasn't like 2 seconds in, and I was seeing this whatever unfolding, which was, I mean, extraordinary, but it was a bit too much. It was just, it was, yeah, you went to light speed in less than a minute, and just in a second. And I remembered that phrase immediately. He's like, if this is too much, close your eyes. Well, I closed my eyes, and like the behind the scenes view was, in some cases, it's like, to me, a little more muted than the open eye view on psychedelics. I know some people prefer maybe behind their eyes. To me, like what's in front of me. It was just a level of fidelity like greater than I'd expected. And one thing that was very different from it than say any other is, say, in any other psychedelic experience where you might have a behind the eye kind of experience, whether it's a tunnel, whatever it is, it's kind of fixed on you like a movie screen. It tracks with where you're looking. One thing I knew immediately from like this DMT experience, I closed my eyes, I turned my head, it didn't track with what I was looking at. I actually turned my head in an environment that was new. Yeah, it was in a contained space. I mean, it was a navigable environment. It was not static, and that kind of alarmed me, because I knew, like, okay, I'm seeing this, but as soon as I turned my head and the view moved with it, as if I was in a VR headset, if anyone's experienced that, it was baffling. But one thing I would say, and it was something I think Hawkeye even mentioned, it was extraordinarily calm, and you're very lucid, if not as lucid as you might be sober. That's one thing that was remarkably apparent to me, is in which I didn't feel anxious, considering I was completely aware of kind of the surrounding, or how alien the surrounding I was in was. And strangely, I was like extraordinarily calm. And for a moment, I don't know how long it was, it just sounded like I was in a cavern with, I could hear like what sounded like trickling waterfall. I remember before a lot of people saying consistent with it, there's like a high-pitched whine, and I would say it's probably character, even like the jet engine, like, or jet metaphor is kind of consistent with that. If anyone's ever been around like a supersonic aircraft, like it's a very, very high-pitched frequency, and it kind of leads to that. But there was a point where it was just still, and it was eerily calm. And I don't know, I just recall that, and like coming back, like Charles said, or Hawkeye mentioned himself, the few minutes, like in the moment, it was, I don't know what I was processing, but in the few minutes when it was fading, when I realized like I had the awareness of what I just experienced, I mean, it was kind of profound, because that was the only moment I could even reflect on what was going on, what had just happened, because it was ending. Like in the moment, I don't think it would be possible to really do much of anything. But for that reason, though, there was kind of an afterglow that was, I don't know, it was just different. I have CPTSD, complex trauma from childhood abuse. I'm also autistic, and maybe for that, you know, it's helped in extraordinary ways in both those things for me, just self-acceptance and feeling good about myself too. I think from that experience, to be able to see just the good and how beautiful things
Nathan
can be. So that's all I got. But
I wanted to, that was awesome, and I didn't want to like interrupt you while it was happening, because I was so intrigued into the story, and I wanted to let that happen. But I want to ask you again about Alex Gray.
Oh yeah, so yesterday, so I was selected for to attend the COSM, Chapel of Sacred Mirrors Visionary Art Intensive, which is held annually at COSM. I was selected with 24 other people internationally. But anyway, it didn't happen this year due to COVID. It's supposed to be next summer. But I did have an opportunity yesterday to meet with Alex and Allison Gray, and had a Zoom chat, with them. And It was super rad. I will share out some of the content to Jayson, and maybe, I don't know if it's fitting, it'd be cool to share. I think there's some things that might be worthwhile to share with, I don't know, PPS, but I think it just speaks to how powerful that experience in these substances are. It literally changed my life. I would not, I don't really know how to put it without probably getting too emotional, but having been a fan of his and seeing his work from a perspective that, one, felt like I didn't have any talent to ever imagine that I could even create anything at all, to psychedelics kind of dissolving that for my own self, to then have an experience that kind of ignited this creative interest of my own, to end up talking to this person I was in awe of years ago for reasons I didn't understand, was just, I can't express. I mean, it itself is like a psychedelic experience, and I don't know. People can say these substances are whatever, but my life has been changed numerous times by them, and in extraordinary ways. And I'm not saying that as an advocate to use them, but just as someone, well, from my own experience, I am. Yeah, sorry, that might not be what you want to hear. Sorry, Jayson, but yeah, it was really good. I just got to talk to them about, yeah, my art. They looked at my artwork, and yeah.
It's all good, dude. This is totally the place for like getting a vulnerable share, and we're all here with that. And I think that, you know, while maybe people were expecting straight up bulletin information there, what they got was much deeper and more authentic and real. So I appreciate you sharing that with us and what Alex means to you.